St Paul's Church in Easton, Somerset was built in 1843-4 as a chapel of ease in the parish of St Cuthbert Out in Wells. No record can be found of any more ancient site here, yet it's a centre of a number of leys, fanning out over the Mendips and Somerset Levels. Strangely, although it's a 19th century church, it's constructed in Norman style, with rounded arches and windows, and a porch with columns and foliate decoration. It was designed by architect Richard Carver, who designed several churches in Somerset. The church is unusually entered through a west door, and there are two large copper beech trees just inside the gate, on either side of the porch. Each of these has a trunk which has grown in a spiral, leaning away from each other. The soil in the churchyard is full of quite large rocks, which make grave digging quite difficult. This is not the case in my garden, which is just across the road from it. Although it's positioned at the bottom of Easton Hill, coming from Wells, it seems to be positioned on a rise in the ground, compared with the houses around. This could be seen as a foothill of the Mendips, but the ground seems to dip again before rising to the Great Plateau. The church is due north of Glastonbury Tor, and there is a ley running between them. A cardinal point alignment, as Alfred Watkins would have said. There is a mixed clump outside the south transept, on the Glastonbury ley. One of the trees is a fairly mature holly with a double trunk. Near to it is a yew tree of a size that could predate the church. But behind it is another much larger one, which almost certainly must, perhaps by centuries. This tree also has a double trunk, and it seems to be standing on a mound. The ley comes northwards across the Somerset Zodiac through two crossroads running between Park Wood, the centre of the Zodiac, and Dundon Hill, the Gemini figure. One is a crossroads tracks near King Weston, and the other is a crossroads at Butley. On this one there is a deciduous clump. The ley then continues northward through Glastonbury Tor, continuing through Easton Church to the Priddy Long Barrow, a Neolithic long barrow excavated in 1928, and on to Butcombe Church, built in the 15th century and restored in 1868. Finally to Felton Church, another 19th century building. There's a small Scots pine clump visible from my garden in Easton near Wells in Somerset. These were often noticed by Alfred Watkins and Tony Wedd as frequently occurring on leys. There is an alignment with the church just beyond that clump, through this garden, through a eucalyptus tree which has grown into a spiral shape, to Knoll Hill, which is just visible from this garden. The line then runs across this junction and through the north transept of St Paul's Church. St Paul's was erected in 1843 as a chapel of ease in the parish of St Cuthbert Out in Wells, through the efforts of the vicar, Reverend H.W. Barnard. It's built of coursed and squared rubble, with a slate roof and bellcote in neo-Norman style. It then passes through this junction and up over the Mendips to pass just south of Ebor Gorge to two tumuli on the plateau, after going through this junction with another footpath. In the other direction, it runs across the Somerset Levels to Knowle Hill. Coming southwest, the line then runs through Panborough Hill, which was formerly Paidenberger and sometimes known as Barrow's Hill. It lies on a ridge currently carrying the road from Wells to Wedmore. It has a singular profile, especially when seen from the levels southwards towards Godney. Alongside the hill is the Bleedney Gap, through which the old River Brew flowed. The levels are blocked westwards of Westhay by sandy ridges, causing the Brew and Mere Pool to drain through Bleedney Gap, falling about 15 feet in the process and necessitating a change of boat. Thus the island was a stopping place on the river, possibly a minor trading place, and the first proper viewing place of Glastonbury Tor when sailing from the sea towards Avalon. It was once known for its vineyards. A chapel, thought to be dedicated to St Paddan, a local saint, was located somewhere on the hill. The line then runs across the levels, going through Catcott Bridge, until it reaches Cossington Church. This was built in the 13th century and revised in the 14th and 15th centuries. Victorian restoration was carried out in the 19th century. In 1900 the West Gallery was removed. The dedication to the Virgin Mary was before 1505. Finally the line reaches Bordrip Church. This was built of blue lias in the late 13th to early 14th century on the site of an early church which had belonged to Athelney Abbey. It underwent Victorian restoration in 1866, and the crossing tower has gargoyles and a parapet. The parish of Bordrip was formed long before the present church was built. It embraced Bordrip, the separate hamlets of Bradney, Crandon, Knowle, Ford and Wood. Crandon had been a river port in Roman times, and the southern slopes of the Polden Hills had been a Romano-British arable farm centred on a villa. This was found in the field known as Churchy Breeches, and had corn-drying kilns. The general rise in the water level destroyed the port. In 1681, one of the most tragic of stories reputedly unfolded in Bordrip. Edward Lovell married Eleanor Bradford, by whom he had two daughters, Eleanor and Mary. Eleanor, the daughter, heiress of the family, honour and estate, died June the 14th, 1681. Her most sorrowing husband mourned her, taken away by a sudden and untimely fate at the very time of her marriage celebration, which this monument to be put up. Tradition associates the tragic death of Eleanor Lovell on her wedding day with the woeful ballad The Mistletoe Bell, compiled by Thomas Haynes Bailey, son of a Bath solicitor, some time after 1820. He tells of a fair young bride of one Lovell, son of a medieval baron, who, playing hide-and-seek in the revels of her wedding day, hid in an ancient chest. Its spring lock shut firmly behind her, and she was imprisoned and not found for many years. This tragic fate has long been believed to have occurred in the rectory. The line then runs through the middle of Bridgewater, passing just south of Sydenham Manor. The ley douses at about 12 paces wide, and as it crosses the garden diagonally, that means it more or less fills the whole garden. Another lay through the centre comes through Church Hill, Dinder, and then just south of St Michael's Church there, but so close that it could touch it if the lay is wide. A church was established here after the Norman conquest. However, the current building was first erected in the 14th century. There's a stone carving of a two-headed dragon about the south chapel window. The legend of the Dragon of Dinder goes back for centuries and is documented on illuminated transcript, which is now preserved in Eton College Library records. The legend goes that a terrible dragon was terrorising both livestock and villagers. The then Bishop Jocelyn was called upon to save the people of Dinder. He rode out with his men-at-arms, but at the last furlong commanded them to remain at a distance, while he rode on and single-handedly beheaded the beast. There is a mosaic telling this story outside the Bishop's Palace moat in Wells, and Bishop Jocelyn's crozier, Crook, displayed in Wells Cathedral Library, has many dragons on it. The lay then runs across this field to this tower in the wall of the Bishop's Palace at Wells. Then goes through the Bishop's Eye, the archway into the Bishop's Palace, created by Bishop Beckington around 1450. And then goes across the marketplace. Then through this sharp turn in the road, and through St Joseph and Teresa Roman Catholic Church in Wells. The lay then goes through Nyland Hill, a prominent feature on the Somerset Levels, though there doesn't seem to be any known prehistoric activity there. Nevertheless, it is a lay centre, and featured in my research into leys and orthotonies, UFO sighting lines, in the 1960s. From here the line continues to the Church of St Gregory in Weir, Somerset. It dates from the 11th century, although most of the building is from the 15th. St Gregory is the Pope who instructed St Augustine that pagan temples shouldn't be destroyed but converted into churches. Alfred Watkins felt that this was a reason pre-Reformation churches occurred on leys. Another lay to the centre goes over Dulcote Hill. To this 19th century school and chapel, which is now a private residence. There is a grotto nearby, built around 150 years ago. The lay then runs through St Cuthbert's Church, the parish church of Wells, before going on to St Paul's, Easton. There is another lay running through this church, which runs along St Cuthbert Street to Fenny Castle. The lay then skirts the edge of Crook Peak to run through St Andrew's Church, Loxton, thought to be on a Saxon foundation. Another lay to Easton runs through Westminster Slight itself, the centre of the dragon legend. This is the peak to be seen on the right of this picture. The lay then runs through this multi-junction near St Cuthbert's Church. The line then goes through Easton Church and then on through the 12th century church of St Lawrence at Westbury sub Mendip, which is in the same benefice as Easton, and on to another 12th century church at Rodney Stoke, and on to yet another 12th century church at Criston. Another lay comes through the imposing chapel of the former Mendip Hospital, a mental hospital near Wells. The chapel is now residential accommodation. The line then goes over the wooded Knapp Hill before reaching Easton Church. It then goes through Lodge Hill Wood, just east of Easton, and on to a crossroads at Middle Stoughton. Lodge Hill originally had a railway station. Finally reaching the Iron Age hill fort of Brent Knoll, formerly known as the Mount of Frogs. According to legend, Ida, son of Nuth, who was one of King Arthur's knights, came to the Mount of Frogs on a quest to slay 3 giants who lived there. The fort has been claimed as the site of Mons Badonicus, site of one of Arthur's battles. Another lay goes from Easton to a tumulus on the Mendips, and then to St Lawrence Church, Priddy. Dating from the 13th century, this is another church in the same benefice as Easton. The church is surrounded by a circular churchyard which predates the building. It's also one of the places that, according to legend, was one of the places the teenage Jesus visited with his uncle Joseph of Arimathea. This legend of his visit to Priddy is linked to the fact that little is known about his life between the age of 4 and 30. It's said that Joseph was a metal merchant and came to Britain trading in Cornwall and in the lead mining area of Priddy, and brought the boy Jesus with him. See the video Jesus and Uxella on this channel for information on my research into this legend. It goes from here to another tumulus near the junction of 9 Barrows Lane with the B3135, and a quarter of a mile of coincident track to another near the B3134. Then it goes to another 12th century church at Chew Magna.